Saudi Arabia, Sands of Time is presented by Tarek Osman. The readers were Jude Akawudike and Jessica Turner. The producer is Neil McCarthy. The series continues next week and will be available to download from the Radio 4 website.
What makes Joe Queenan angry?
My kids make me angry. My job makes me angry. The producer makes me angry. This street makes me angry. Then there's my wife.
The American satirist presents A Brief History of Anger.
Real anger from ordinary people is people who've lost control.
This week's Archive on 4.
We had to bring Dante into this because he has a view of every sin. Where did he put the angry?
They end up, of course, in the Inferno, where they tear one another to pieces.
A Brief History of Anger. On Saturday evening at 8, and then available on the BBC Radio 4 website.
But now, analysis. Technology has been replacing manual work for decades. David Baker asks, does it now have white-collar jobs in its sights?
I'm on the Docklands Light Railway in East London. Every weekday, a fleet of 48 of these trains ferry up to 44,000 commuters an hour, many of them travelling to and from the financial powerhouses of Canary Wharf. The system has minimal delays and a good safety record, and most noticeably, there are no drivers. These trains are operated by computers housed in a central control room. Technology has always destroyed jobs, as factory workers have known for decades. But it's also created new ones. There are very few typesetters in Britain today, for example, but plenty of website designers. Now, however, something different seems to be happening. Technology has become so good that, according to some researchers, it's destroying jobs, but not creating as many new ones. And the jobs that it now has in its sights are those done by the people you can hear hurrying to their offices around us now. Professional, white-collar workers whose careers may no longer be the one-way ticket to wealth and security. In this programme, I'll be exploring whether technology is different this time round and what the effect could be on the future of the world of work.
The scope and the pace and the scale of technological progress is pretty breathtaking to me.
Andrew McAfee is a researcher at the MIT Sloan School of Management and one of the authors of The Second Machine Age. His book has attracted huge attention and controversy by arguing that we're now going through a very different period of technological change than we've seen before.
There have been these periods of technological upheaval in the past. They were accompanied by a lot of job destruction, and then eventually people went back to work. Now, when I look at the range of human-like abilities that technology is suddenly demonstrating, I think this is different. I think that the comparative advantage of human beings in lots of different fields is vanishing very quickly, and I don't think we've seen this before. As technology races ahead, it's leaving behind more and more people in their capacity as somebody who wants to do their part of the classic bargain. I offer my labor, I get a good middle-class living in exchange. It's pretty clear that bargain is under a lot of pressure these days, and I believe tech progress is one of the main reasons why.
Others agree. Federico Pistono is a computer scientist and social activist, and author of Why Robots Will Steal Your Job. We'll hear about the subtitle of his book a little later in this programme.
What's happening now is radically different. We are essentially exchanging types of workers at the level of the cognitive abilities that only humans were supposed to have up until just a few years ago. So if in the past we kind of outsourced to machines manual labor, now we are outsourcing cognitive labor.
That cognitive labour is what those people we call professionals do now. And those professions were meant to promise us a secure future. Medicine, for example, or law. Andrew McAfee again.
None of us would have called what a doctor does routine work, but it is basically an exercise in pattern recognition. If I walk in with a problem, the doctor listens to my symptoms, and she makes a diagnosis about what's going on with me. Now, that work requires an extraordinarily well-trained, very talented human being to do well. But cutting-edge software is better. It's superhuman at pattern recognition. And I look at medical diagnosis as a really subtle and important exercise in pattern recognition, but the technology is better at that than we are now.
And the law?
A lot of the work that a lawyer does, especially a more junior lawyer, a lot of that work can be automated. In America, we love to sue each other. And one of the initial steps in that process is I send you all of my documents, you send me all of your documents. And then in the old world, we would each hire an army of lawyers to sit around and read those, go through them. It's a process called discovery. Now, there's a class of software called e-discovery that just takes all the work that was done by that army of lawyers and automates it, lets you do it at the push of a button.
And what about my job? Could computers really write magazine articles or radio programs, for instance? Well, maybe not yet, but they're on their way. For 5 years now, a US company called Narrative Science has been producing journalism that's written entirely by computers and distributed automatically to websites, magazines and local papers, replacing the jobs of reporters. And you know what? It's not bad. These examples come from Forbes, which uses the service to get financial results quickly up online.
Revenue fell year over year in the third quarter, snapping the three-quarter streak of rising revenue. While being profitable for the last 8 quarters, the company
has a narrower loss than a year ago when it reports fourth-quarter earnings on Monday, March 2nd, 2015. Analysts are expecting a loss of $2.04 per share.
The consensus earnings per share estimate has moved up from 68 cents a share to the current expectation of earnings of 74 cents a share.
The trouble is, lawyers, doctors, journalists, these are not professions we thought would be under threat from computing. Let's face it, there was some snobbery here. We could envisage factory work being done by robots, but law? And yet, according to Carl Frey and Michael Osborne, 2 academics at the Oxford Martin School, who've been researching this subject for some years now, within a couple of decades, computers could be doing more than a third of the jobs that British white-collar workers do right now. That's a lot of middle-class professionals trying to find alternative employment. So what does that leave for us humans to do? Journalists get a lot of time on the radio already. So let's hear from 2 practicing professionals, a lawyer and a doctor.
My name is Gregor Pryor. I'm a partner at the international law firm Reed Smith. The type of law I practice tends to be based around intellectual property. The effects of technology on law firms, it certainly means that less time is spent by lawyers on doing certain things. And it has almost certainly resulted in a reduction in the number of support staff around law firms. You don't need tens, hundreds of people doing administrative roles because computers have made that so much easier.
So bye-bye the secretarial pool. But what about their bosses?
Lawyers are seen as trusted counsel, and that is partly through the advice they give, but it's also partly to do with their personality, their delivery, the way that lawyers can make clients feel more comfortable. Some lawyers would say, well, you wouldn't let a computer operate on you.
Of course you wouldn't. Well, actually, maybe we would.
There are already operations being performed by robots.
Benjamin Ellis is a consultant rheumatologist at Imperial College Healthcare NHS Trust in London.
Some parts of surgery are technical tasks that a computer with support and input from an experienced surgeon can perform better perhaps than that surgeon working on his or her own.
This is starting to happen in cancer surgery. Instead of operating directly on the patient, the surgeon uses a computer to control a robot arm. This can make much tinier and more accurate movements than a human. And it's not hard to imagine this process being automated entirely. Medical scans are just digital images, after all. And as Andrew McAfee has pointed out, computers are now very good at pattern recognition, which includes things like spotting cancerous tumours. So why not leave the robot to its own devices? Dr. Benjamin Ellis again.
I'm not sure at the moment that computers are capable of giving people the emotional support they need, and even if they could, I'm not sure that you would necessarily want a hug from a computer.
To be honest, I don't know if I'd want a hug from my doctor. I think I'd prefer a good diagnosis any day, but I can see his point. But do we really want hugs from lawyers, even in a metaphorical sense? Don't we want the law to be ruthlessly analytical? Katie Atkinson, a reader in computer science at the University of Liverpool, thinks artificial intelligence could do a lot of the thinking and advice we currently pay lawyers to do.
A lot of people, when they think about artificial intelligence, it's easy to think about the science fiction movies.
And as she goes on to explain, this isn't science fiction, this is happening now.
If you're in a court of law, the different sides, they exchange arguments, and what we try and do is we try and model the kind of argumentation that goes on in law.
She is currently working on software for a local law firm that will help its lawyers weigh up the pros and cons of a case before they proceed.
I envisage it as being a decision support tool, like I say, so perhaps something that could help legal analysts make sense of their arguments before they go to court, or anything where you're trying to get a handle on large volumes of data and information.
And in field tests, her programme seems to be delivering the goods.
So I've done some exercises with some colleagues where we have taken legal cases and we've seen how we can represent the arguments in those legal cases in terms of our formal theories. So we take specific legal cases, look at the transcripts that have been taken from the judge's opinion that the judges have delivered on the case. We've looked at the arguments for the plaintiff and the defendant, and then we've seen how those arguments fit into our formal reasoning models. And then we can press the button, if you like, and say go, and our programme will produce the same decision that the judge has produced in that case.
But why stop there? If computers can advise lawyers about the strength of their cases, why not use them in court? Lawyer Gregor Pryor is, perhaps understandably, resistant to the idea.
I'm not sure, at least dealing with the clients I deal with, that they would be comfortable with the idea, necessarily, that a computer would be the sole and definitive arbitrator and judge of their dispute. So for that to happen, for computers to totally dominate the dispute process, humans would need to be comfortable with that.
Yes, but as those typists found, a computer doesn't need to dominate a process to put a lot of people out of work. Woody Allen, in a clip from his third album, recorded live at Eugene's in San Francisco in 1968.
My father was fired. He was technologically unemployed. My father worked for the same firm for 12 years. They fired him. They replaced him with a tiny gadget this big. It does everything that my father does, only it does it much better. The depressing thing is my mother ran out and bought one.
Back then, the idea that technology could replace humans was something we could joke about. Economies were booming, and there was plenty of work, in the US at least, at all levels of society. Today, we seem to be in a different place, not only because of the recession, but also because the machines are getting better and better at a startling pace. 5 years ago, speech recognition technology was pretty hit and miss. Now there's the speech-recognizing assistant Siri on the iPhone, and we can ring the local cinema and tell a computer the name of the film we want to see. But people are divided on the effect this will have on jobs. Maybe technologists are just getting overexcited, which is what technologists tend to do. And as the history of economics has shown us again and again, this time is different is a very dangerous statement to make. We put a number of these points to Gavin Kelly, CEO of the think tank the Resolution Foundation. He has a different take on the effect of technology on jobs.
I think that most economists would be quite sceptical about the idea that we're moving into an era of technological unemployment where somehow technological change will kill a lot more jobs than we create. In this country, we are awash with work at the moment. We are creating a lot of jobs in this economy. They're not very productive jobs, but I think in this country it's hard to make the case that we're running out of work because of the pace of technological change. I just don't see that. So I'm in no sense saying that technology is irrelevant or downplaying it. I'm just saying it's affecting the distribution of work rather than the overall quantity. I think we can be fairly confident that almost under any foreseeable scenario for the next 10, 20 years, we're going to have a very large number of jobs in our economy in low-paying sectors, often called low-skill jobs. It's a given that we're going to see a big growth in the number of people caring, particularly for the elderly in our economy, but I think we're going to see a growth in leisure sector, if you like, related jobs, personal services and so on. There have been some quite rapid change in some sectors, but actually the thing that I'm generally struck by is that change has been slower than I would have thought it had been. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen more change, given the fact that machines are so much more powerful than they were 5 years ago, never mind 25 years ago. So in some ways our economies actually are more sluggish